I've geared this starting vegetable class kind of towards the beginners. So I'm kind of start from the beginning, try to build a good foundation, and try to instill the confidence in y'all to get out there and start getting your hands dirty. Um, so why would we even vegetable garden when we can just go to the store and buy some? Much easier. Um, but it makes it a little more easy to get that access to that organic fresh produce. You know what kind of inputs are going into your vegetables. You can just walk right out into the yard and get it. Don't have to get in your car and go to the store. You get that enhanced nutrition from those fresh vegetables and the access to them. If you're doing it, sometimes you can see a significant cost savings on groceries. Sometimes you won't see that, and that's okay too. The really more important part of it, I feel like, is that it reduces that stress and improves that mental health, enhances your total health mentally and physically. They've done studies on getting your hands into the soil, even helps like the microbes in the soil physically helps your body and helps just everything. So. And you can supplement vegetables for your little furry friends, or I've got ducks at home. That's like my main thing is what can I supplement with duck food, you know what I mean? So I asked all of my coworkers here their secret tips for gardening success. And I wanted to put all our faces here because we're your secret to success. You know, we're a wealth of knowledge here, just willing to share our experiences with you. You can learn from our mistakes. And Darren here, he's been working here for the last 30 plus years and gardening the whole time. So he in working on building the soil health of his own garden. So if you read all of our little sayings in there, you kind of get a theme in that, like mine says here, lower your expectations. It's not going to be perfect by any means. They're living materials. It's a process and have fun. To Darren, keep trying new things. And Andrea, it should be about the process and enjoyment rather than about perfection. Um, literally asked them all separately, what's the secret to successful gardening? And we all did this kind of like theoretical, just have fun, just be loosey. Not, it's just not hard, rigid type thing. So this is my goals that we're going to go through today. And we're going to start with Plant Needs 101, where I'll talk a little bit about temperatures, germination, water, sun, and competition, like the basic needs that goes into a plant to be happy. I'll talk a little bit about soil, which is the lifeblood in which all things grow. Come on in. Um, the soil is what it really is all about. Everything comes down to the soil, the health of it, the compaction of it, the air in it, the place where water can go, the things living in it. It all impacts the plant and its health. So, and then after that, once we've got a good little basics on, I'm gonna go back into the plant needs 101 because 102 because we all need to learn a little bit more about pests and diseases because not, it's something that will come up. So, and lastly, time and money. And we've all felt that probably in the garden before. Sometimes it can feel a little expensive, but I want to tell you that time is money. You can figure out how to supplement things other places by spending your time gathering resources somewhere else, secondhand things, you know. Or you can, if you value your time or a little bit more than your money, you can like go buy the starts and the fresh stuff. So it's just like instant gratification ready to go. Whatever floats your boat, you can go. It works. It all works. So in there, we're going to talk a little bit about seedlings versus starts, about the effort it takes to put into gardening and weeding, watering, and feeding, and how all that effort adds to a bigger, better yield, and how planning your garden and what you're going to put in there equals better production. So even more food that you can grow in your little area. So Plant Needs 101, we're going to start with temperature because that's kind of a big deal in our world right now, early spring in the Willamette Valley. Um, Generally, plants need 55-degree temperatures to begin to grow, and that means like soil temperatures too. So our air temperatures are starting to get a little warmer. Yesterday was absolutely gorgeous, but it takes a little bit for our soil temperatures to warm up too. Take a drink. I recommend figuring out your last and first frost dates of the year, as seed packets advise planting based around that. Here in the Willamette Valley, our last hard frost is April 15th. Average. This is average. Every year is a little different around here, especially. And by that, that means the ground will freeze. Um, and then the last light frost, generally, May 15th, and that's like the last where the air will freeze and it'll kind of frost around everything. The ground holds temperatures pretty good once it started to warm up. So the old wives' tale of our area for Philomath Corvallis is that it's the last snow off of Mary's Peak. Means it's time to go. But our snow didn't get there till a couple weeks ago, so it's here or there. The temperature and the time of the year will influence greatly what type of plants you can grow. So temperature continued, crops grow depending on temperatures. So speed and spring and summer crops are considered to be a little bit frost tolerant and harvestable come summer. These are things you can plant now, even like beets, broccoli, cabbage, carrots, cauliflower, onions, peas, potatoes, and radish. Welcome in. Some of these can be direct seeded in mid-March. That means straight into the ground. And then some of them need to be seeded late January, early February, maybe like a transplant to put in the ground mid-March. You can come on in if you'd like. So when we're referring to summer and fall crops, we're really talking about the heat tolerant or heat loving types that harvest more towards fall. Things like your tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, squashes, melons, corns, herbs, and greens. These things tend to be heat loving. So really plant after that May 15th time. You could gamble between that April and May time, but they're gonna love the heat after April 15th. Herbs and greens need a lot of heat, but they can also enjoy some sun protection come summer because they can scald sometimes, like your leafy greens and your basils. They love the heat, but scalding not so much. And then your fall and your winter crops are considered to be frost tolerant again, because we're getting into the fall there. And some of them can even be overwintering for spring harvest. Garlics and onions are great ones for that. Shallots, leeks, beets, Brussels sprouts, collard greens, kohlrabi, radish, broccoli, and cabbage are all cold tolerant. You can notice there's a little bit of a overlay between the fall and the spring because it's just that cold tolerant crops.
So when you say that they are like cold tolerant, does that mean that we can plant, like we can start trying to grow them even when it's cold outside?
Yeah, some of them, yeah.
And they don't need to be seeded like indoors like the others?
It depends on which ones you're looking at. Like garlic and onions, we got onion bunches in there. Those onion bunches can go in right now. Mm-hmm. Um, and you can even get started on some lettuces and leafies, but once we get that, if we get a hard frost or even a light frost, those can take damage. And then that might be where you'd put like sometimes like a cut milk jug over it to protect it, or you'll see people use Rime, which is a protective fabric cloth. I'll talk a little bit more about spring vegetables in a minute. So germination is a fancy word for the plant erupting from the seed. I said for the seed. Don't pay attention to that. And in order for a plant to break out of that seed, it requires just heat and humidity. In most cases, not all of them. seed packets will tell you what a seed needs. So in direct seeding is the verb or the verbiage I'm going to use for planting into its final maturing place. And when you're direct seeding, you'll find that temperature is the major limiting factor for that because a lot of things need that 55 degree and up temperature to get going. Some things are a little more okay with frost tolerant with that. Some things can be planted before that last soft frost date, but then again, it becomes a gamble if, especially around here. Sometimes we get that really late freeze around here and it just takes out everything we've been working on in spring. It's a little bit of a gamble. I recommend reading soil packages for or the seed packages for the soil depth, temperatures, spacing. Emergent state refers to how long you'll see the seed pop out, a little green thing pop out of the seed. And maturity dates when you'll start to pick fruits off of the plant. Um, Germination temperature is specific to different kinds of plants. So it depends on what you're trying to work with. Peas are a good cold loving one that you can do now. But if you're trying to germinate like your tomato seeds outside right now, they're not gonna like that. However, you can do your tomato seeds kind of starting indoors where you can control the temperature. In we refer to that as the indoor seeding, starting inside and then transplanting to the final maturing place. Some plants are not going to be appreciative of this. This is because they have sensitive roots or really deep roots. Seed packets will warn you if it's an issue. You'll often find that adequate light indoors is the major limiting factor because we can control the temperature a lot more. So they need lots of light, but only after germination has occurred. So they don't, germination only is heat and humidity, but as soon as the little green thing pokes out of the seed, that's when they start needing light. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a place where it's usually sunny. And like out here, we have a lot of cloud cover and there's still sun, but it's not like really coming through the clouds.
Yeah.
How much of an impact does that have, even when we're indoors?
Yeah. So indoors, it has a really big impact because that's another filter coming through. It does have a large impact. So when we're talking about sunlight, we tend to refer to it in hours of direct sunlight. And when you're from a place like California, full sun goes, okay, let me back up. Here in the Willamette Valley, full sun is considered 6 to 8+ hours of direct sunlight. And then when you go to like California, where it's a lot hotter and that sun is a lot more intense, that can go down to like 2 to 4, depending on where hours of sunlight can be full sun in places like that. So it's kind of, I hope that answers your question. Uh, yeah, yeah, especially when they're outside. When they're indoors, you might want to supplement light and get a little light next, even if they're in your window. You'll see them get leggy and long, and unsupportive of their little leaves, and that's an indicator of that they need more light. You'll see sterile soil used for seed starting inside, and that's generally just to increase germination rates. So when you're starting seeds outside, you kind of think germination rates might be a little lower because they're uh, prone to being cold, getting frost, getting too much water, or a rodent coming by and stealing your seed, or a bird coming in and stealing your seed. But when you're starting inside, generally you want to get as much germination as you can because you spent money on your seeds and you want them to grow. Um, These germinated seeds do not need fertilization until you see their true leaves. And that is, so when they poke, little plant pokes out of the seed, little green plant, it puts off a first little round of leaves that they all look the same. It's the same leaf. No matter, doesn't matter what you planted it, everything looks the same, which is why I recommend getting labels too, because like good luck remembering what you put in there. Um, But anyway, so first little seed or leaf, everything looks the same. Second round of leaf is a more indicative leaf of what is growing in there. And that's a sign, that's the true leaf. And that's the sign that it's going to be hungry soon. That's the sign that it's going to start growing and needs a little bit more fertilization. When you're starting inside and you're not ready to transplant outside, I recommend repotting up slowly into potting soil. And don't go too big, too fast. You don't want soil going bad, like anaerobic, air leaving out of it and just nasty at the bottom of it. Or transplanting in the ground slash final spot. If that's a pot, that's cool too. So here's a little breakdown of when you can direct sow slash start inside. And I do have handouts I can give you guys after this. So don't stress about remembering or writing this all down. It's just really nice to take a look. Direct sow peas, you can get that going as soon as January. Like they're very cold hardy. Um, February, like I said, we got lettuces and onions going on in there. Radishes are very cold hardy as well. Beets, potatoes, spinach, chard. Our potatoes, I think, are coming out next week. We'll be having potatoes on the shelf, ready to go. And then it's all the way to mid-May before you want to start doing anything warm, like those cucumbers, melons, or squashes. They really love the heat. Sure, you could get going like before then, but they really like if you do a early started tomato plant next to a late started tomato plant, the late tends to do even better because they love the heat that much. And then starting inside in the weeks before you put it outside. So it takes a little while between germination and being able to transplant into its final maturing spot. So early season tips, tricks, and tools. So right now, Willamette Valley, temperature is our biggest limiting factor. I wanted to throw out there, greenhouses are kind of nice. They increase humidity and temperature, but a lot of them are still not quite warm enough. Depends on if you're heating your greenhouse or not. You can use soil covers, dark fabrics to preheat the soil in ground or raised beds. That's just like going above and beyond. It's not necessary. Some people will do this with their strawberries to get the strawberries going earlier. Um, So you'll see pots will warm up first in spring, like the black nursery pots. They can absorb all that heat. They'll warm first, then your raised beds, and then the native soils, because the native soil's in the ground. It's all thermoregulating itself, so it's all got to warm up at the same time. It takes a while. I'd recommend amending your soils, which is just like mixing other things in to get a light, fluffy texture when direct seeding because those seeds aren't very strong. They don't want to have to fight the clay soil to pop out and see the sunlight. Vegetables like it light and fluffy, and most of them really prefer it nutrient dense because some of them are very hungry. And I'll talk a little more about that too. You can protect small starts and seeds from freezes, ice, hard rain, and snow with remaize and cloches. A remay, I'm referring to the middle picture harvest guard. It's just like a fabric blanket you can set out over your plants. And then the harvest guard, like that little styrofoam cone at the bottom. Like I said, you can also cut up milk jugs, use whatever you got, it's fine. Especially in the hard rain, physical pounding. Little seedlings aren't going to like that. Um, or you can just wait until the soil temperatures are adequate as per the seed packets and get your things out there. There's no real, like, true path, you know what I mean? It's all about having fun and doing what suits you, your needs, and your goals, and what you have. Plant Needs 101 continued. I wanted to talk a little bit more about competition because it really hits home about why weeding in the garden is so important. So, all plants need water, sunlight, and nutrients, and they will fight each other to get it. This will make your plant smaller, weaker, with less yields. Imagine a carrot or a garlic with its roots matched up against another plant. Like, how is a carrot going to get big if he's crowded? It's also important to note that plants take up nutrients and water at different locations in the soil. Their root zones, their roots are like different shapes, different sizes. They don't all look just like that one there. And their shoots, which is referring to the green growth up top, grow in different locations and use different amounts of light. And you can use those differences to our advantage for growing large amounts in small areas and companion plant things together in the same location. So again, we're getting into gold star territory there. You don't need to do that, but it's kind of nice, especially if you have a small growing area. Traditionally, the Native Americans used the Three Sisters growing method, which is corn for structure, squash would provide shade, and beans would fix nitrogen into the soil for the hungry corn and squash. And they would do that all like in the same pot, same location, everything grows together. And because they have such varying different roots, varying different growing structures, they work all together and they don't compete. Um, Today, you see a lot of companion planting for pest control, such as basil at the base of tomatoes or marigolds around crops for and bonus for pollination services. So it's kind of twofold. Weeding around root masses is incredibly important for the yield and production of your plants, as well as moisture retention and whatnot. All right, sunlight. In general, so everybody's different in the garden, but in general, vegetables prefer 6 hours of direct sunlight, 6 to 8, even more. Warm seasoned crops think that the warmer is the better. Tomatoes, peppers, squash, melons, and corn. These are all things that love the heat and are only going to get bigger during it. Cool season crops can handle somewhat shadier areas, so you can use this strategically. Lettuce, kale, chard, broccoli, and cauliflower, again, are cold season, cold tolerant crops. They tend to fail or get a little stressed in the heat sometimes. Pay attention to what your location gets in sun. I like to mention that the morning sun in the east is less intense than the uh, less intense in sun and heat, even with the same amount of time, versus uh, the evening sun in the west, which is intense and hot and more likely to scald your plants. South-facing areas are where you're going to get the most exposure of sun during the day, at least in our area. On the other side of the world, that's different. And then water, incredibly important when it comes to veggies because some veggies are practically made of water, like melons and tomatoes. Some veggies are thin and prone to scalding, like lettuces and herbs. In any case, watering is important to vegetables all around, especially in container gardening or raised beds. They can't forage for water in the native soils around them, so don't let them get bone dry. Water them because they're dependent on you, things in pots. Water at the base of the plant to avoid uh, diseases and sun scalding and weeds. It's threefold reason to water just at the base of the plant. This picture of this pepper here is a bit of a sun scald on the actual fruit itself. When you see sun scald on the leaves, it'll be burnt tips, crunching and curling. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, I love
I'm
it.
really trying to learn how to do this. No, okay. So we live in Oregon. There's a lot of rain, right? And so I have had the issue of like overwatering things, and I don't even know how much water a thing needs.
Yeah.
to live. So what do we do like with our garden so it doesn't overwater? Or
Yeah. So it's a completely different game, winter and summer, around here. Winter, it rains constantly. You oftentimes can just forget about any overwintering veggies you have. I I put my garlic in back in November, and I only ever look at it to weed it and feed it on a sunny day. Um, but when we go into summer, we don't get rain anymore. We're completely dry through the summer. So all the watering needs fall back onto you. Um, and there are some rule of thumbs on how to predict how much water your plant might need. And that comes with a lot of thought on what kind of soil your plant is in. Is it in a pot or is it in the ground? The ground has lots of water retention. Even like 6 inches below will be moist in the summer. So you can water a lot less when you're doing in the native soils. But if you're doing in a pot that gets cooked by the heat, you'll be watering multiple times a day potentially.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll talk a little bit more about watering too.
This is a question on the previous issue one. Uh for greenhouses, um is it standard indoor greenhouse? Is it standard for people to have lights?
I would say indoor greenhouse, I would say, yeah, it is pretty standard to have a light.
You have like a bay window and they're all up in this window, but still you want to light.
It depends on how they're growing. So I would plant a few, see how they're emerging. If they're getting that leggy and they're reaching really hard towards that window, that's an
Okay.
indicator they need more light.
Okay, thank you, that's really helpful.
You're welcome. All right. Choosing the right location in the layout. It should have lots of sun, 6 to 8 hours of full sunlight for optimal photosynthesis, which is just the $2 word for plant living. Have easy access to water. Water is so important for vegetables throughout the summer. Like I said, you're the sole waterer. It doesn't rain around here, and if it does, it's phenomenal. Um, Choose a location close to your spigot or have it easily accessible with hose. You don't want to have to be hauling buckets of water from your spigot to your garden. You want it to be pleasant. You want to enjoy being in that location and have it be easily accessible and that so that you want to spend your time there. Because time is money. So you want to be able to spend your time in there and put that effort in there. And then it can be anything and everything that you have. Get creative. Regardless of location, I believe that you can grow food. Work with what you have. Raised beds, pots, trellising can provide plenty of space for growing plants. There's lots of ways to do different things. So we got plant needs 101 out of the way. Next, I'm going to talk about soil, which I'm sorry, it gets maybe a little heavy and boring in here, but it's soil. It's dirt, which is a bad word for people who love soil. Soil. Okay. So when you're planting in ground, you want no competition, which means no grasses. And that's like the biggest deal, especially when you're converting a new area into planting. So when you're breaking or kicking down the grasses and the other weeds beforehand, you can do this with thick mulches, cardboard, some chemical applications. There are some ones that burn really well but don't stay in the soil and are organic, so you don't have to worry too much about it. Or tilling up the area, which is kind of the traditional way to do it. I like to put in there that tilling can reduce the soil structure, so you can see it gets in there, breaks everything up, which makes everything a little bit tighter and compact, which can lead to bigger issues long term. I would recommend using it sparingly. This doesn't mean it's a bad thing by any means, but I recommend using it sparingly and maintain the health of the beds to build the ecology of the soil rather than tilling it every year for a fresh start. If that makes sense. Willamette Valley soils are rich in clay. They get a really bad rap for this. I grew up in Eastern Oregon, and all of our nutrients and great things about our soil got stripped away from the Eastern Oregon and implanted into the Willamette Valley during the Missoula floods way back when. So we have fantastic soil, and I will stand by that. The clay just makes it a little more difficult. So What clay does is it binds to that water and that nutrients and makes it less accessible to the plants. Um, so we can build the soil with composts and organic matter, and that will break down the clay and break down those strong bonds that that clay holds to those nutrients and allow the plants to uptake them more readily.
I have a question. So last year we started raised beds and we had a really good soil. I can't remember, like something good that had like poop and stuff in it. And so this year we're like starting over again. Do we have to feed it? Or is that soil just good enough from last year?
It
Uh,
was really rich.
It was really rich.
yeah, so I'm sure it would be fine for this year,
Okay.
but every year it's a good idea to put some sort of forethought into maintaining the ecology and health of your soil because it's like building it year after year after year. Like Darren, the gentleman who's worked here for 30 years, he's lived in the same location for 30 years and gardened on that same garden for 30 years. So
Okay.
when you don't put back into the soil, after 30 years, it's going to be depleted and sad. But if you every year kind of put a little bit more organic material, composts into your soil, you're just building it and making it better and better and better every year.
What do you think about chicken poop from the coop? Like straight, like that has some straw in it and some shavings, is that?
It's fantastic for the bed. The only issue with it is it's hot, which means it's very strong in nutrients and it
Okay.
might burn your plants.
Gotcha.
So it's a good idea to let it compost down a little bit if you could find another location to put it, or put it into that bed and then work out of another bed for a little bit, just for a couple months. I think it just takes a couple months for chicken poo to kind of break down and
Okay,
become more pleasing for a
so like
plant.
if we didn't grow winter crops, we could put it in the winter and then let it
Yes.
compost in the bed.
Yeah.
And then plant in spring.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you, like put compost on your soil, like my soil is like super clay, as the rest of the valley apparently. Do you need to work it in, or can you just put it on the top, like, and it
So
just eventually like breaks down into the like extremely hard clay soil? I mean, like, how does that much work?
it does both, I want to say. You can work it in, and that's a little bit more instant gratification. Um, but you can also use it as the mulch over top of things, and it will still continue. It's just still slower, I guess.
So if you're using it as mulch though, nothing's just growing it, because it's like really, they want it just, does it actually help with weeds? Won't weeds just grow in the compost itself?
So the idea is that it's weed free. The compost that you put on there ideally doesn't have any weed seeds in it. So when you put it on there in that 2-inch thick mass, it hides the weed seeds underneath of it from the sunlight and stops them from being able to germinate. So it does have weed retention values, but floating in seeds that maybe transplant on top of it might get a little excited. So yeah, healthy soil means healthy plants, and that means weeds too. Um, any more questions?
Is there any benefit to putting like wood mulch over like your beds to keep the moisture in at all?
There is some benefit, and again, that it's organic matter. Organic material is great, basically whatever you're using. However, bark has this really fun thing that it does when it's decomposing, that it becomes nitrogen negative and that it eats nitrogen out of the soil. So it tends to, yeah, make things a little hungrier at some point, but once it's decomposed and in there, you can also put some extra fertilizer in there to help it get past that point. But yeah, as it's decomposing, it eats nitrogen out of the soil.
So you use cardboard to kill the weeds, then put your compost on top of that, or leaves underneath and compost on top of that. That's all you have to do, right? And then it will go through the cardboard eventually, the plants will.
I'm sure your cardboard was there all winter long. It got all nice and soft and wet from the winter.
It has,
Um, you could maybe cut out a little hole to make roots a little more accessible to that native soil, but the thought of it, I do believe that it should be able to penetrate eventually, but I think if it was me, depending on how soft and wet your cardboard is, I guess,
I
like,
guess I can wet it down.
yeah, you wet it down. If you can stick your finger through it, I'd say a plant wouldn't have too much trouble getting through that either.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Okay. The other thing about our rich clay soils is that we go from incredibly wet to incredibly dry really fast, and it starts cracking and becomes really hard. In this, compost and mulch becomes your best friend. So raised beds can either be open bottom or closed bottom. Open bottom can allow nutrients and water access to the native soils below. It's great for reducing the need for watering and feeding. It's great for large root mast plants and things that are very hungry, like tomatoes, squashes, and melons. However, it does leave you vulnerable to rodent pests and burrowing animals. So sometimes people will put like a chicken wire or something uh, rather than fully closing off the bottom of the bed if they've got like mole or gopher issues.
So do roots have to, in order to access nutrients from underneath, do roots have to reach that?
Yeah.
Nothing comes up, right? It all goes down.
Correct, correct. And things like tomatoes grow giant root masses. Some things only do like 18 inches of root masses. Some things only like 6. So it just depends on what you're growing, if it'll be able to access that or not. And something like that too, if you want to bring nutrients up, that's where cover crops come into play. I'll talk a little bit, it's not much, but we do have a class on cover crops on our YouTube page too. Containers and pots are tricky. They're really nice to use. I love them. I do them. I've grown lots of vegetables in pots and containers, but they're dependent on you for all the water and the nutrients that they need. You go on vacation, you come back, your stuff will be crispy. So pick a good potting soil when it comes to, and set a good fertilization schedule to keep on top of that. And your watering game needs to be on point. So if you're like me and you're likely going to let things get crispy and forget to water, consider a timed mechanical irrigation so that if you're not reliable or so you can go on vacation without thinking about it. We have a really good irrigation section in here and we make it pretty easy to understand how to do that. So. All right, soil, but mulch. I have to throw this in every time because I want everybody to know about mulch. Mulching is both a noun and a verb. It's exciting. As a noun, we're talking about the substance that you're using to mulch. This can be bark, it can be straw, compost, cardboard, leaves, or a different kind of soil. And then there's the action of mulching, which is physically putting that soil on top of the soil, physically putting that mulch in 2-inch thick on top of the root mass of the plant. This helps with the moisture retention, water retention, weed suppression, and can add nutrients back into the soil over time. And then I made this cute little picture here to try to hit the point home. You can see the stems, shoots on top, the roots below. This is just kind of what a plant looks like in general. And then this little square plane above the plant is my mulching section, generally above the root mass, which is generally about the width of the foliage on some things like blueberry plants. Sometimes they'll get wider than that, but that's a good rule of thumb. A good rule of thumb is that 2-inch thick. Next rule of thumb is 1 inch away from the collar of the plant because you don't want to choke it out. All right, soil, but amendments. We'll talk more about amendments. So amendments are just anything that you're like adding into the soil. Vegetables are generally incredibly hungry plants because they have a very short window of growing time to produce high yields of product. Very hungry plants include the warm season crops like tomatoes, squashes, peppers, melons, corns, cucumbers, and eggplants. Many of these also struggle with calcium deficiency that causes blossom end blight, which is this picture of the tomato up in the top right. I'm sure we've all seen one of our tomatoes doing that. This is a little bit more of an issue on the bigger tomatoes, the heirloom tomatoes, versus the little cherry ones. You don't see it as often on the cherry ones. No problem. All right, first, organic matter, which I'm referring to as decomposing once living material. And that's things like your compost or your chicken manure. And then NPK, which is fertilizers. And that NPK refers to the little 333 or 484 number you see on the fertilizers. They stand for nitrogen, phosphorus, and then potassium. And nitrogen is for our green growth plant, anything green, the leaves, the stem. Phosphorus goes for fruits and flowers. And then potassium and phosphorus helps with roots too. And then potassium is just kind of general all around help. To break it down, just very basic. I then wanted to talk a little bit about granular versus liquid fertilizers. So this tomato tone down here is a type, an example of a granular fertilizer. It's going to be little balls of oftentimes smelly dust. um, and then the liquids, which is concentrate, you'll put like into a watering can, just like a couple teaspoons per gallon, and then water that in. Granular is really nice to put in at planting your vegetables because it lasts in that soil for like 3 or so months. It'll slow release to the plant. Whereas the liquid is a quick release straight into the veins of the plant. Get it going, let's get hopping. The um also note calcium deficiencies can be prevented by adding lime into the soil. We carry this fast acting lime here. You can put that in the hole with your tomato at planting and then a little bit more on the top around 4th of July, and that'll really prevent those blossom end blights. Also, the tomato tone is really cool because it has a little bit of calcium in there too, so it helps 2-in-1 type deal. Any questions on that?
Well, it's not good when you just whole areas, calcium. I mean, I've been told that I should probably get my soil tested underneath the cardboard. And then calcium isn't good for the whole section.
Yes, yeah, you can treat the whole thing with the calcium. The fast acting lime will raise pH just a little bit. So you want to pay attention to that too if you're getting your soil tested. All right. That wasn't so bad. Soil wasn't so bad. Plant needs 102. So now we're gonna get a little boring again. So crop rotation keeps pests and diseases on their toes as they attempt to return to your garden year after year. Any efforts you put into crop rotation will benefit you. This is not something you have to do perfect by any means. But the general idea of it is that you're going to group major families of plants together, and the families are nightshades, which those are like your tomatoes and your peppers. Legumes, which is our peas and our bees. We really love legumes because they do that nitrogen fixing thing where they take nitrogen from the air and put it into the soil. Your cucurbitates, which is a fancy word for the cucumbers. The alliums, which is your onions and garlics. And the cruciferous, which is your cucumbers. Those are your brassicas, like your broccoli and cauliflowers. So families, they share similar growth patterns and eat the same nutrients to depletion at the same kind of zones in the soil. Families also share insects and diseases. So these are the two reasons you want to kind of swap things around. For if you want more information, I'd recommend signing up for our organic gardening class with Camille next month. She's going to talk a little bit more about crop rotations and cover crops. Pests and disease are an inevitable thing, but are more easily fought off by healthy plants. Like you can think about your own immune system when you're on your perfect schedule, you're eating right, you're going to the gym, doing all the things, you're more easily able to fight off a flu or a cold versus if you've been traveling, eating all the wrong things and not sleeping, you know what I mean? So we want to provide these healthy lifestyles to our plants so that they can better fight off these pests and diseases. You can do this by maintaining your good watering schedule, your feeding, and your weeding. The really bad diseases are usually preventable via crop rotation. Pests, you're likely going to see mostly aphids, slugs, and beetles eating your stuff in the garden. It's really easy to just physically remove them. If you see a plant with this many aphids on it, that is just, oh, sorry. If you see a plant with that many aphids on it in that top right corner, it's easy enough just to pluck it off. And
We had slugs eating our strawberries last year.
Just my strawberries, but mostly it started in the broccoli.
But I just never saw them, but it's safe to put that sluggo stuff on it.
Yes.
And then eat it.
Yes.
Okay.
Sluggo is really safe. People will throw eggshells out there to cut up their little bodies. You can use copper. Either I have like a copper tape you can put around your beds, or you can pull up those copper sponges and pull them apart. The copper has like a weird interaction with the slime on their bodies. They don't want to cross it.
That's really.
I've also heard this one's a little, I'm on the fence about this one because it sounds both like a nice way to die and also a terrible death. Is people will put out bowls of beer.
I have.
And they love it so much they just drown themselves to death. So when it comes to slug protection, like consistency is key with this, like staying up on top of your sluggo and stuff.
Yeah, I never saw them. Like I just can see the damage.
Yeah. They are really good at hiding like at the bottoms of pots on the undersides of soils, and then they come out at night and you'll see their little trails, slug trails.
Follow the trail.
Yeah, Sluggo is great. It's organic. Captain Jack's organic, great for aphids and beetles. When it comes to animals, they will also be a problem because the deer and the birds, they're going to want your stuff too. You can use physical barriers, sprinklers, bird scare tape, whatever. I've heard people with issues with birds will paint rocks to look like strawberries, so they'll stop trying to eat them after a little while. You can use chemical deterrents, which are mostly things that are like scent deterring. Bone meal is a scent deterring one. There's really smelly. There's like the liquid fence out there. We recommend sometimes using a twofold approach if you have really bad deer issues, in that you can spray your perimeter of your area, and that makes it a little bit unpleasant to be at, scented wise. And then you can spray capsaicin, which is pepper, spicy pepper stuff. You can buy it here, or you can make your stuff own at home, spicy pepper stuff with like garlic and clove in it. You can spray that on the actual plants, and that makes that plant bitter and spicy. And so they'll label it in their brain that that plant right there is bitter and spicy, and they're less likely to come back to it. That's and especially important with the young ones because the little deers, they just try everything. They're in that like that baby stage where everything goes in the mouth. Diseases, you will see diseases too. I mean, around here, powdery mildew is a big deal. We often tend to see that every year once the heat starts setting in and we going into the late summer. Um, this is considered fungal. Oftentimes you can remove the sick parts. And if it's getting rough, you can use a fungicide.
Can it be avoided?
It can be avoided with air, like aeration. You want to not plant things too close together so that the air humidity stays too long around the leaves. Again, watering at the base of the plant versus the foliage will prevent that as well. Um, and then there are some fungicides that have like preventative value to them.
Does it get into the soil so that the next year it's more likely to come up, or it's just a here and now problem?
I'm not entirely sure on that with powdery mildew, if it overwinters in the soil. I feel like it's a here and now type problem. Because it just kind of shows up. Um, Viral issues, those are the really bad ones in your plants. This is like the curly leaf blight in tomatoes that just is like a death sentence to the tomato. Inevitably, it'll probably put off a few tomatoes for you, but also that means it's in the soil. Like sometimes it's just too bad before you realize, you know. So that's why I say learn about these types of things and just put any bit of effort into preventing it that you can with good practices and crop rotations. Goes a lot further than you'd think. And like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect by any means. Just a little bit of effort will go a long way. It's just those people that are like, that wine barrel right there has had a tomato in it for the last 20 years, you know. All the pests are going to know to go to that wine barrel, and the pests are going to know to go to that soil, and then the families share the pests and whatnot.
So we had one bed, that we planted sweet peas in two different beds. And one of them, the sweet peas came out like almost deformed. It looked like, it was really weird, like it was like a half bed we made, a small bed. But none of the other plants on any of the other beds had this weird deformity. Like, do you know what would cause that?
The only thing that was different was the rest of the beds got weed mat, and that bed got cardboard.
Yeah.
It could be some sort of disease thing, maybe overwatering. The cardboard could be holding too much water retention in there. You said this was last year.
Yeah. It was
If
last year. We don't know if we should plant something in that bed or what we should do with that bed
Yeah.
now, because.
if it was me, I'd probably, you did legumes last year, you could do tomatoes in there. That tomato's got a really thick, deep root mass that'll go to penetrate that cardboard.
Okay.
And it's a different family than the legume, so you're less likely to see whatever issue.
And the other thing we thought might have caused it, I just remembered, was that there was a walnut tree that we cut down that was like
5 feet away.
like near that bed.
And I read something, the walnut trees are like producing
Toxic.
toxin.
That's one of the ones
So could that go through cardboard?
I wouldn't expect so.
Okay.
You see anything else funky in this bed, take a picture or bring a sample in for us to take a look at. Pictures are worth 1,000 words.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I put together this nice little Venn diagram to kind of try to hit home on how to identify what might be happening to your sick plant. When you're seeing pest issues, you'll often see webbing, yellow dotting, sticky dew, tunnel boring, holes, white fluff, small bugs, or a slug trail. If you're seeing diseases, you'll see brown dead tissue, spotting, brown streaking through the tissue, melting, or that white powder dusting. And both pests and diseases, you'll see deformed new growth happening in there. If it's environmental, which is what we're doing to the plant or what we've allowed to happen to the plant, you'll see legginess, which are signs that it needs more sun, reaching more sun, over or under watering, you'll see browning tips. But if you see a fruit all the way through browning happening, sometimes that's an indicator of chemical burn or like chicken manure burn. And brown tips, you can see both in pests and environmental issues. And then smelly soil, tissue scabbing, you'll see that both in environmental and disease problems. All of these can indicate any of these is defoliating, wilting, sad leaves, yellow leaves, stunted new growth, or even death. It could be any of those things. So you're having trouble figuring out what's happening to your plant, take a picture, bring a sample into us, and if I can't figure it out, Camille can't figure it out, just can't feel it. Darren, who's been working here for 30 years, has a supercomputer brain. I don't know if you ever talked to him, but I'd recommend it. He'll know.
He was here the first time we came in and was like, so beyond helpful.
So he's more helpful than Google, I swear.
Yeah. I think I was like, oh my god, I didn't know that like 5 times.
He's phenomenal, and the retention is just crazy. And then I like to always I have to get on my soapbox about pollinators too. Be mindful when you're doing anything to do like pest or disease control. You know, you don't want to hurt your local pollinators. Always read and follow the chemical application rules for your own health and safety, but also think about your local pollinators and how what you're doing might impact them. So, still on my soapbox, pollination facts. Most veggies will benefit from pollination. Only a few actually need it for production. But don't worry about it because there are over 800 types of native bees in Oregon. And this does not include the honeybee. The honeybee is from Europe. You plant it, they will come. They do. You are a steward of this land by doing anything out in your garden. You will have a greater impact than you realize, so make it positive on the environment. There are many ways you can help pollinators in the garden. You can do this by planting things with flowers. Veggies count. Consider not mowing. Don't use chemicals where you can, or use intentionally, sparingly, strategically when you do. You can leave bare soil areas for bees that nest in the ground. You can use drip irrigation, which helps benefit them as well. You can leave branches and trimmings out for your leaf cutter bees and your cavity nesting bees. And there's just a million more things you can do for your pollinators. And I love talking about it, so you can always ask me about it. We also have a beekeeping section here, Camille. She's all about the honeybees. So we're all about our pollinators here. All right. Let's go into time and money and how does time equal money? And I would say a greatest way to show this is seedlings versus starts. So it is cost effective to start things from seeds. You know, you get that little packet for $3 and it comes with 50 or so seeds, whatever in there. You usually have a good amount of seeds in the packet and versus your actual growing space. Sometimes you have way more seeds than you actually need. And you can hold on to them for the other years, next year or whatever. New seeds really only means better germination rates. Older ones are just going to have less percentage popping out of that seed. It's worth giving it a try. You will see more options when you're able to do things from seed, and it's very satisfying to take this like little inanimate object and have it work for you, making you fruits and vegetables. However, starts that have been started by the nursery are ready for transplant into the soil, depending on temperatures. The nurseries have done the hard part of raising the babies. You will pay for the labor and supplies, and this adds up to about 4 to 8 weeks of work and time saved. You will see harvest time sooner than you will with seed. They're great backups if your seed doesn't germinate or your plants die, and they're great for some instant gratification in the garden. So one's not better than the other by any means, but you can save money here and there by doing things a little different. Effort equals yield. So feeding, watering, and weeding is a consistent chore in the garden. It's just part of life there. Efforts here will be rewarded with more and larger fruits on plants. Weeding, you have to weed. Happy soil means happy plants of all kinds, even the weeds. So keep plants and other weeds at least 6 to 8 inches away from your plant, and that will prevent competition. To reduce the amount of weeds that you see in your garden, mulch at least 2 inches over your plants, water at root zones only. I like to include this picture of me watering this raised bed because that's the don't do. I'm watering the soil all over the soil. You're going to see all sorts of weeds popping up between that squash and that tomato if you do it like that. And also you get some splash over on that squash there, which increases your chances of powdery mildew. So I really recommend taking that long wand I got and just shoving it right down in the plant. This was for a photo op, so caught in the action. So water at those root zones only. Consider using a weed barrier fabric. That really helps. And then consider using cover crops on your resting soils. Um, just a little bit into cover crops. You want to learn more about it. We have other classes, but the whole idea of it is that you can pick different cover crops for different goals that you have in the garden. So cover crops can fix nitrogen, which means taking it from the air and putting it into the soil. Cover crops can break up compaction, which might be something that you want to do if you're trying to get the lower parts of your bed that cardboard broken up or nutrients pulled up from the bottom of the soil to the top. Those really deep tap roots can go deep into that soil, create all the shoots up top, and then that's when you're going to go till it in to add more organic matter into your soil.
Can tap roots or like roots on the tomatoes go through weed mat?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Um, some of them can reduce pests and diseases by adding fumigative properties to the area. And some of them, the main goal is just to add organic material back into the soil. So really depends on what kind of plant you choose to put in there. And then the biggest caveat to that is you must remove or till at the right times before they flower and put off seeds. Otherwise, the cover crop itself will become a weed. Feeding. So a balanced granular at planting is usually good enough for most vegetables. That's that granular, all-purpose, the tomato tone, really any of that you can throw in the hole at planting. The organic stuff is really nice because you don't have to worry about burning your plants and you can put roots, fertilizer on roots, not worry too much about it. And then with organics, with organics, you can put it right in the hole, sorry. Long season crops, 50 to 60 days, may want a second granular application. So that's, again, like maybe around 4th of July when you're putting in some more lime, you can put more fistfuls of fertilizer in there as well for your tomatoes. Early and late plantings will benefit from liquid in addition to granular, as well as the heavy feeders as well. So you don't necessarily have to use a liquid in the garden, but it will benefit these heavy feeders, which is your squashes, your peppers, your cucumbers, your tomatoes, as well as things who are like on the cusps, like later in the season when it's going to start getting cold and dark again. You want it to grow fast. Again, that liquid is quickly uptakeable by that plant, where that granular is a slow release through the season. Watering will be more prevalent in pots and raised beds. Different crops have different needs. So some things are thirstier than others. Some things will get mad if they get too much water. Tomatoes is one of those things. Watering by hand allows you to check on your plants, pick the yields, and make sure, and doing it by hand is very water efficient.
So what is enough?
So this is when it gets tricky.
If I'm standing in front of my plant, watering it today, how do I know when I have watered it enough?
So my next question is, what plant do you have? Where is it
Well,
planted? What kind of soil?
Okay, so let's say it's in a pot. And I do this, but let's say it's in a pot, and it's a tomato.
Okay, so a tomato in a pot, you're gonna water incredibly thoroughly until it comes out the bottom. And make sure it's very thoroughly watered when it's in that pot. And then you're gonna want to let it dry out. in between watering, just the slightest bit.
Okay, so while I'm standing there, I'm gonna water it until it comes out the bottom of the pot.
Yep.
Okay, and then I'm not gonna water for a few days?
Mhm.
Okay.
And then, so then it gets a little trickier when you're in a raised bed because you can't watch it come out the bottom. And when you're doing, yeah, when you're doing native soils, it's also a little tricky because it's got water retention below the surface, and the clay allows it to just run off and go other places. So when you're watering, you're going to think about your plant, what plant you have. Tomatoes like to dry out a little bit between watering. Your lettuces are not going to want to dry out as much and have smaller root systems, and tomatoes have huge root systems. So is your root system huge? Is your plant huge? It's going to need a little bit more water. It'll dry out a little bit quicker. If you've got more soil, soil holds on to water. So the raised beds in ground, you can water a lot less. It's harder to tell when you might need water. There's no replacement for getting dirty in the garden. Sticking your hand below the soil, sticking your finger in the soil.
So how, is there a rule of thumb for how I stick my finger in the soil, and how deep the dampness of the soil should be when I've got water?
When you're done watering,
Yeah, I'm about to water, I've done it, and I wanna know if I put enough water in, it's in ground.
it
How do I
should
know?
it should all be wet when you stick your finger in there. It should take some good before you see any dry if you're in ground.
Okay.
I want to say it's hard to give a rule of thumb when it comes to vegetable gardening because everything is so different and widely variable between an in-ground planting or a pot. So when I'm growing things in pots, I water once a day, sometimes twice a day. Um, Maybe avoiding my tomato depending on what stage it's in. Um, when I'm doing it in ground, I water maybe once every 3 weeks, depending on what it is.
In the summer, you water once every 3 weeks?
Depending on what it is, yeah. And then also there's dry gardening. Darren has a class on dry gardening where he waters at planting and then doesn't water again all summer long. And it grows the most delicious melons. And he does fantastically. So,
Is that where you like bury the wood? Or no?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Wow. Melons need a lot of water.
Yeah, yeah. He had the most delicious watery cantaloupe I've ever had. OSU does a lot of uh work word I'm can research. There we go. I was looking investigation. They do a lot of research on dry gardening over there, and they produce a lot of tomatoes, delicious watery tomatoes in dry vegetable gardening. So
We need to all do that because we'll have less water eventually.
yeah, so I think the biggest thing about dry farm gardening is allowing enough root space. So that's not necessarily something you can do in a pot.
If I planted something in the ground and I watered it, and I'm not gonna water it for 3 weeks. If I went out there after, in the middle of that, in a week and a half and stuck my finger in the dirt. What would it be like? What would the dirt be like in terms of dampness?
So it
Just trying
again,
to figure out when I need to water again. How can I tell I need to water?
some plants it's really tricky. Um, can you re-ask your question?
So you said that if you plant in the ground, you might water and then not again for 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And on the front end of that, if you stuck your finger in the soil, it would be, I could stick my finger all the way in and it would be down the whole way in.
Yeah, I mean, it might be dry at the very surface of it, or the mulch over top those 2 inches might be dry, but it would be moist below.
Underneath that,
Mhm.
okay, so the question is. How should I determine,
The time, so.
how. When to water again? So if I went out, if I thought it was gonna be 3 weeks, I watered so that I could tell a long ways in that it was damp. I went out there a week and a half later and I felt the soil again. Is that how I'm gonna tell whether I need to water again? If I feel the soil, what's it gonna be like? Is it gonna still be pretty damp? Is it gonna?
It can, it,
I mean, I know trying to figure out when to water and how much is really tricky.
Yeah.
Because I've been at it for years and I'm not good at it. But, so I'm just looking for, what's the rule of thumb about how I figure out how to water, and how much to water, and when to do it?
I might refer you to Darren for like these specific questions. I think he might have some sort of rule of thumb.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm just having a hard time answering your question because there's so many variabilities to the
Right.
to the life cycle of the
Yeah.
plant,
Yeah.
to the soils. But I think Darren might have some sort of rule of thumb.
But, okay, so, but if you plan in family groups, like we were talking about before, that family group is generally gonna need the same kind of watering. And
Correct.
So that's one of the deciding factors is who is it you're watering?
Yes.
And then you decide for that set, and then if you have another set, like he talked to me the other day about planting in strips, families in strips.
Mm-hmm.
And to rotate them just every, so, you know, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 families, 4 strips. Next year, you're just gonna rotate everybody over one slot,
Mm-hmm.
take that guy and bring it back here, and do that kind of rotation.
Yeah.
Okay, and so then the question is, for each family, what would the watering be like for that family, and you just stick with that for, but it might not be the same for each one, that's what you're telling me?
Yeah, not the same for each one. And then also, is it a small little baby? Is it mature?
Got it, okay.
We can help you figure it out.
Yeah.
I know that one of the slides said like plant names, I think said 6 to 8 inches away from each other.
Yeah,
Is
well,
that-
sorry. That's the general rule of thumb for like weeding. The seed packets will tell you how big your mature plant will be at maturity, and that is an indicator of how much you should space the plants themselves.
Because I've been reading too, that if you plant things close together, you have less weed.
That is true because they shade things out and they're provide more competition.
Oh.
There's a fine line in there though between competing with the weeds and competing with each other. So watering by hand is pretty efficient. Drip is consistent and efficient. How do I know when it needs it? My biggest recommendation is getting dirty, getting in, checking with your fingers, thinking about the root masses of the plants and the families. You need help figuring it out, bring pictures, and we can help you figure it out. When you're watering, I recommend to water deeply and thoroughly. Like with the pot, you want it nice soaked through, going through the bottom. With the beds, you want it nice and moist. And with native soils, it might take a little bit longer to achieve that penetration. But allow the soil to dry a little bit before doing it again. So you really, rather than a light watering at the surface of the soil, you want a deep, thorough root watering, deep penetration in the soil.
Do all plants, as a general rule of thumb, like that?
Yes,
Okay.
as a general rule of thumb, yeah.
So tomatoes and bell peppers would both like
Yes.
deeply watered.
Yes.
Okay.
But there's a trick there because like strawberries have like a root system that's like this big.
Yes, that's what I was gonna ask earlier is, I've been doing a lot of research, I'm trying to grow strawberries from seed right now, which I found is not recommended. But I'm doing it anyway, and I have like 2 full plats that I'm trying to grow strawberries. And I'm hearing something say bottom water, let them dry out, and then bottom water again. And then something just say keep the top consistently moist.
So the trick with strawberries is you're looking at seeds right now,
Yeah.
and seeds need 100% humidity to germinate. So
Okay.
you want it moist all the time. However, when it starts becoming a strawberry and it has a crown, which is like the neck of
Uh-huh.
the strawberry, those don't like getting too wet. They don't want water on that. So
Depends on what stage.
That's
Exactly.
so helpful. I've not
That is
heard
really
that
helpful.
yet, and that is going
Keep
to
them
pretty
moist
much,
for now.
yeah.
So you can imagine there's a huge difference between watering strawberries with a soil with a root mass this big and has access to soil all the way down here versus a tomato that has a root mass this big.
Yes, that makes sense.
Planning equals production. So this is where you really put the effort in to get a large amount of things going in your area. You can schedule your weeding, your feeding, your watering, make it second nature. Sometimes I like to say, you know, when I get paid, I feed my plants. When I eat, they eat. Plan for space and square footage so you can cram more plants into the same space without causing competition. Plan for time. You could be ready for the new plantings and the new season transition. Look at maturity dates. Are you going to have open space in the next 60 days? Do you need to start thinking about what to start now to put in there when you have an open space? And then you can think about consistent harvest even. So that's when you start like lettuces every week. So you have new stuff to harvest every week. At the end of the season, I would recommend reevaluate. And while you're planning, what worked, what didn't, what did your harvest look like? What did you like about it? And to me, that's what it's all about. That's the most important part. There's no shame in keeping notes, long-term retention on specifics, and some gives you something to reflect on. So I have a hard time remembering, you know, exactly when I planted things last year. So note keeping is pretty ideal. And so what does it actually take to grow a garden here in the end now that we've made it here? I want to leave you with don't fight nature. Plants are living things, they do what they want and then they die. Time and effort will show through the health of your plants and the yield of your vegetables. Use what you have, grow what you love. Plants aren't picky as long as they have food, water, soil, and sunlight. And have fun. Nothing is worth doing unless you're learning and having fun. Why not make it both in the garden? So thank you all for coming. Feel free to email me. I have handouts if you want handouts, and all of our old classes are uploaded on our YouTube page. So check out our YouTube page for more information than you need.
Thank you very much. Right.